Okay, today is Monday, July 27th, and we have some breaking news in the case of the state of Idaho versus Bryan C. Kohberger. Coming from the Idaho Statesman, this originated from the New York Times, but that was behind a paywall. New York Times was behind a paywall. So we're just going to go ahead and take it from the local source, Idaho Statesman. I'm going to go ahead and read this article to you because if you've been following the case as closely as I have, I'm sure that you are, you're excited to hear the news, or maybe you're not. I don't know. That's up to you. But anyway, let's go ahead and read the breaking news that's just come out within the past couple of hours. Actual innocence is my truth. Bryan Kohberger now wants a trial, per New York Times report. Almost 13 months after he pleaded guilty, Bryan Kohberger claims he's innocent and says he will fight his conviction for murdering 4 University of Idaho students. For a New York Times report published Monday, Kohberger provided a statement and interview for the first time since he was sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms in prison in July 2025 and dating to when he was arrested on suspicion of the murders in December of 2022. He has spent just over a year in segregated lockup at Idaho's maximum security prison, south of Boise. My actual innocence is my truth, and the plea, hinged on by false promises and blatant disinformation, must be withdrawn, Kohberger said in a statement in the newspaper Sunday night. The Idaho Statesman also reached out to Kohberger regarding his hope to walk back his conviction. On Monday, a new civil case for post-conviction relief from Kohberger posted to the state's court records website. His handwritten filings included one in support of appointment of legal counsel. When asked what relief he seeks in one of the filings, the 31-year-old wrote out a withdrawal of a guilty plea, according to his petition and affidavit. He wrote in the petition that during his attorney-client discussions, he was convinced to falsely confess to capital murder and felony burglary by coercion, disinformation, false promises, and the withholding of exculpatory discovery. He was convinced that actual guilt was not an important factor in his plea deal, and as he could have faced the death penalty, he wrote and was advised to lie. As part of his plea deal last summer, Kohberger, 31, accepted a no chance of parole and waived his appeal rights in exchange for avoiding a possible death sentence if he took his capital murder case to trial. But, like all prisoners, he maintains the right to ask for a court for post-conviction relief, an appeal action that cannot be signed away, including on potential arguments that if he received inadequate legal representation during his original prosecution. At a change of plea hearing in early July of 2025, Kohberger endorsed his public defenders under oath in court before Judge Stephen Hippler of Idaho's 4th Judicial District in Ada County, acknowledging that the legal team led by attorney Ann Taylor had performed to his satisfaction. But a legal U.S. Supreme Court decision in 2019, Garza versus Idaho, affirmed that a defendant can always appeal on certain Sixth Amendment grounds, regardless of whether they previously agreed to waive those rights. Kohberger also signed a guilty plea advisory, a plea agreement, and a written factual basis. Connected to the deal here, he accepted from prosecutors that saw him sentenced to the rest of his life in prison. Taylor also told the court she consented to her client's entry of his guilty plea. I want to make sure that your plea is given voluntarily, Hippler told Kohberger in court last summer. And I want to make sure that you actually committed these crimes to which you're pleading guilty, because I don't want you to plead guilty to a crime you didn't commit. Are you pleading guilty because you are guilty? The judge asked Kohberger at the hearing before twice reading the specific murder charge tied to each of the 4 victims. We're not scared of it, Steve Goncalves, father of Kaylee Goncalves, told the Idaho Statesman by phone on Monday. I always stood by the work of FBI agents and other people. If he wants to fight for the death penalty, that's exactly what we'll go for, and that's what he's facing. There's so much evidence against him in this case, so we're not scared of a trial, not one bit. The Latah County Prosecutor's Office declined to comment Monday, citing pending litigation. Moscow Police Chief Anthony Dollinger also declined to comment. My heart goes out to the families of Madison, Kaylee, Xana, and Ethan, who have already endured unimaginable loss and now must face today's deeply painful news, Idaho Attorney General Raul Labrador said in a statement to the Statesman. My office stands ready to do whatever is necessary to ensure justice is fully carried out. The Statesman also reached out to Taylor for a comment. Already, Kohberger's case has cost taxpayers more than $8 million, a statement analysis found. Of that total, nearly $5.5 million covered the expenses of his public defense. Under Idaho law, a defendant must seek post-conviction relief within a year of a 42-day clock expiring from the deadline to file a direct report of their conviction. In Kohberger's case, his post-conviction relief petition deadline is the first week of September of this year. Why am I breaking my silence? Kohberger told the New York Times by phone. A lot went wrong in those plea discussions, and I really do want to be heard. Merely filing a notice to appeal does not itself violate the terms of a plea agreement, the U.S. Supreme Court said in the 2019 case out of Idaho, but Kohberger's effort to reopen his criminal case could jeopardize his current sentence and restore the chance of the death penalty, or even possibly a federal case, at which point capital punishment could also be back on the table. So there we have it. Bryan Kohberger filing that petition with the court seeking a new trial. I would love to hear in the comments where you stand, what you think, your opinions on this case. So my plan here is to, with a fine-tooth comb, go through each document, rewinding the clock, kind of starting back from the day of the crimes, the news that was coming out, all of the information that we had, and kind of just going back and doing, I guess, a step-by-step, reopen the investigation and walk through it. I do have a history and a decade history of working in the criminal justice field. So I really wanted to talk about this case. And now that it's kind of being potentially opened back up, I'm really curious to see what new information we get, or if, there's probably going to be a big hold on information. Anyway, I would love it if you wanted to join me in this journey of reinvestigating the case and breaking it down. So I will be posting videos moving forward once a week, if not more. So feel free to subscribe. But anyway, I will be following this closely, and I'm just really curious to see how this all kind of pans out. And I know with the justice system, these things take a painful amount of time, but I think that this is super interesting. I'm really specifically interested in what he said about feeling like he was forced into this guilty plea. I know that on both sides of the Bryan Kohberger fence, where we have people who are, I guess they're called pro-burgers. I don't really like names and terms like that, but we've got people who have been fighting for his innocence since the beginning, just having a lot of questions about the evidence that has been put forth, at least publicly. And now that he feels that he was led to sign this guilty plea by coercion and disinformation and false promises, and this right here, the withholding of this exculpatory discovery. We've always known, for those who have followed the case, that there has been the question of who had that exculpatory discovery, who from that home, potential survivors, would be able to provide, I remember it could have been Bethany, exculpatory evidence of Bryan not committing the crime. So I'm just super curious. I don't look forward to it. I don't want to say that I look forward to revisiting all of these documents and reading through everything from the beginning, because this is such a horrible crime. It's a tragedy. But I think that this is super important for transparency and the justice system. There's no denying that we have a real problem with our justice system. and that guilty people are often let go on technicalities. And some cases, unfortunately, innocent people are convicted of crimes in which they absolutely did not commit. There is no denying that. That's why the Innocence Project exists, and that's why people are filing these appeals and being exonerated daily. But there's also a lot of people who do plead guilty because they are afraid of the death penalty. And I think that's where a lot of people stand with this case. The smoking gun evidence never really surfaced, and I think a lot of people are waiting for that. And I think in certain cases, you can look at circumstantial evidence, and that could really be enough for a reasonable person to put those pieces together. Definitively, I think you can look at certain things and 1 + 1 = 2, and there's really no way around it. But with this case, there are just so many people and players and locations and unknowns and so many contradictions by the witnesses and everyone involved that I think it just leads so much doubt and scrutiny surrounding this giant case. And then this surprise guilty plea that happened, I remember it kind of was all a scramble right before the 4th of July. And everything just seemed rushed and hushed. And in a high profile case like this, that it became a quadruple homicide of 4 very young people, I think we expected the public and people who have worked in law enforcement and worked in different facets of the criminal justice umbrella. I think that we were expecting way more information to completely confirm that he was the actual perpetrator. And I understand the stance of people coming out I understand both sides, but I especially understand people coming out who have maybe not been in the system themselves or worked in the system. And you see it quite plainly because life should be that black and white, right? If someone says they are guilty of doing a heinous crime, you would assume they're signing a paper saying that must be it. Like, that's it. He's guilty. He said he was guilty, right? But I mean, there's so many more layers, and there's just so much complexity to criminal cases like this that people have pled guilty to things that they haven't even remotely come close to doing out of fear. And, what he said here about being lied to and feeling like he was forced because the guilt was not an important factor. And I've heard this come up. I've sat in plea deals before with prosecutors and the defense for people facing not death penalty cases, but life sentences. And, they have a deal and they'll say, well, instead of life sentence, we can give you 40 years, but you have to agree and the family has to agree. And people are afraid to bring things to trial because trial is really risky. And we can see that the media, and I'm not blaming the media, but I'm not saying that the media is innocent here, because the media and the justice system go hand in hand, but at the same time, they can also be direct enemies of one another, because I do believe that you can absolutely be trialed by media. And I believe in this specific case, Bryan Kohberger, he was guilty before the press conference of his arrest was even finalized. I mean, I think people just saw him and immediately said he's a monster and he did this. And to be a defendant who has the characteristics that he has, right? They say he was not the most social. I find that hard to believe. We have a lot of evidence that he was, but I'm not going to go into the specifics. We'll save that for another video. But, we're looking at someone who maybe is looked at by the mass of society as being a little awkward, maybe because he has autism, he was very interested in criminal justice or crimes and things like that. But those things alone don't make you a guilty murderer. But I think the media and the way that these things were reported, and of course the extreme crime that this was, I think our psyches handle things better like this when we can put a monster to that crime and we can say now, okay, that's the person who did it. We don't have anything to worry about anymore, and that monster is locked away forever. But I think the media made him that guilty monster before he was able to have his day in court and have his defense team potentially prove that maybe he wasn't. And I'm not saying that he wasn't, and I'm not saying that he was. That is not what this channel is for. I am not here to push my beliefs on anything about this case on anyone. There's just so many factors surrounding this particular case that we have not ever gotten answers to. And I fear that we may never get answers. But I think that this petition, if it is granted and he receives this, and there is a trial, I think that this is super valuable because the truth needs to be known in this case. And I know that there are so many people that just want this truth for whatever reason. And so, yeah, I think this is really interesting. I am interested to hear what your opinions are and what you think about this news. And like I said, I will be posting videos now regularly starting this week and moving forward weekly. So if you want to join me on this journey of revisiting this whole entire case and just breaking everything down and going through it and really reading it, feel free to subscribe. Feel free to leave a comment. Feel free to reach out with any questions. And I really thank you for stopping by. And I hope that you have a great rest of your Monday.